Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about the different phases of the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal. Nintendo has already acknowledged the console, but they've also spoken on how they will be detailing this console in different phases as we approach release. So how exactly is this going to go? What's Nintendo's overall plan of these different stages or phases of the reveal? Well, that's what I would like to talk more about today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So during the Q&A summary from the financial results briefing for fiscal year ending March 2024, which released early May of this year, this was asked to Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa. Regarding the successor to Nintendo Switch, is there any special intention behind calling it a successor? Looking back at past hardware announcements, Wii U was described as a system to succeed Wii, and Nintendo Switch as a game platform with a brand new concept. This time, it is described as a successor to Nintendo Switch. Is this an indication of your intent to continue with the gameplay and concept of Nintendo Switch? You said there will be an update during this fiscal year. At that time, will you talk about its launch timing and specifications? And President Furukawa responds by saying, "At this stage, we cannot say anything more about the successor to Nintendo Switch. For today's announcement, we determined that the most appropriate expression to use was successor to Nintendo Switch. Information will be released in stages leading up to the launch, as we have done with previous new hardware announcements." So essentially here, Furukawa is telling us that we are going to be getting information on the Switch 2 in stages or phases, as they've done in the past. Now when they say successor to Nintendo Switch, I do think that there is a little bit of a potential implication there that this is essentially a follow-up to the Nintendo Switch. In other words, we are going to have a similar console, but a console that's improving upon the Switch with perhaps some other extra little surprises. Many have tried to draw the comparison between the jump from Nintendo DS to Nintendo 3DS, and that may very well be the case this time around as well. Simply from a logical perspective, considering the success of the Nintendo Switch and just how Nintendo likes to do things when we consider their past, they will try to follow up the Switch the best they can, and hopefully capture a similar audience. But then also, all the different reports we've heard from the different varying reputable outlets seem to be suggesting pretty much this. But keeping on track with the focus of the video, discussing the different stages of the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal, what stage are we at right now? Well, back in May when we got this Q&A, Nintendo did make the acknowledgement of the successor to the Nintendo Switch. That's when we saw this tweet here where Nintendo told us they would be telling us more about this console before the end of the fiscal year, which would be ending March of 2024. And so we are already in the acknowledgement stage. We know about the console, it exists, Nintendo's working on it, and more details are on the horizon. But what will be the other stages? Well, I think our best way to understand what's next is by looking at what they did with the Switch, especially if we are to assume they're going to be doing something very similar here. And the way things worked with the Switch, there was the acknowledgement stage, we knew about the NX, and eventually we got a teaser or first look trailer in October of 2016, and then in January of 2017 we got a full-on presentation, and then the console launched in March. So should we expect a similar outline? I'm kind of thinking so. And now we're waiting on the reveal trailer stage, Stage 2, Stage 3 being the full presentation early in the year, and Stage 4 being the actual launch of the console, which we're assuming is March of 2025 based off the most recent reports. Of course, that is subject to change, we shall see what actually happens. But I do think there's some potential variation here and some other things to consider. So, when are we going to see the second phase? When are we going to see this reveal trailer? It was October 2016 for the Nintendo Switch, but I'm not so certain it's going to work out in the exact same way, because there's a big difference this time compared to the past. The Nintendo Switch is an established console that has sold very well and has garnered significant third-party support, And the overall sentiment from a variety of insiders is that Switch 2 will have really strong third-party support early on at least. And so unlike 2016 to 2017, where Nintendo was coming off of the Wii U, which was a failed console that didn't really have that much to push back then, and Nintendo needed to prove themselves again with the Switch, the roles are reversed here. Developers are eager for the Switch 2, they're waiting on projects to release on the Switch 2, and there may be a variety of third-party games right out of the gates, and so there perhaps could be a little bit of a push for the console to be revealed sooner so they can start announcing these games. So when we take a look at events like Tokyo Game Show in September or Gamescom towards the end of August, I think it's fair to consider the possibility that maybe we'll see reveals slightly sooner, so then the name's out there, people know about the console, they have a reasonable understanding, and third parties can start making announcements for their games during these events and throughout the year. Now, one could also argue that looking at 2016 with the Wii U situation, there wasn't really much need to hold back on marketing a next generation console because there wasn't really much sales to be had with the Wii U, and in this case the Switch is still doing pretty well, so perhaps Nintendo wants to wait even longer and have an even shorter interval between reveal and release. And I think that's a valid consideration, but also I think it's worth noting that back then the 3DS was still thriving, and the Switch is just as much a successor to the Wii U as it was the 3DS. And just looking at the overall software output from Nintendo in 2016, it's actually very arguably better than the software output for Nintendo now. So at least based off the way Nintendo is operating, I don't think we should be telling ourselves that Nintendo's going to hold back on revealing their next console, especially if it's going to be coming out March of 2025. There's not going to be a drought because they're focusing on one platform, and games will continue to come out even after the reveal and launch of the Switch 2 for Switch 1. So the main point here is that there's certainly debate to be had on when we get this teaser, but I think most are under the impression that the reveal will happen sometime between August and October of this year. Of course, this is all operating under the assumption that the console is coming out March of 2025, and we don't know for sure. But let's entertain another possibility. A Phase 1.5, something before Phase 2, which would be the reveal. What if we get a teaser? Something that whets our appetite, that gives us something to speculate on and have discussions on without actually getting a proper trailer. Could Nintendo perhaps put out a cryptic tweet or some sort of random picture of Mario hiding behind another curtain that may have some sort of hint as to what's next? I think it's possible. We did just get this weird teaser for Emio, which just ended up being the next entry in the Famicom Detective series, a visual novel series. So I think it's worth considering, and perhaps this teaser could be used as a way to open the gates somewhat for some third parties to start announcing things before Nintendo deems it time to show the world what the Switch 2 actually is with a proper trailer. I think it's an interesting consideration, and at the very least I would say that we're probably going to get some sort of social media announcement giving us a heads up for when Nintendo will give us some sort of trailer for the Switch 2, as they've done with the Switch 1 and other major announcements we've got in the past, like for example, the final trailer for Tears of the Kingdom. That was announced in advance, and then we all got together for a brief live stream of the final trailer. So even if this trailer is only 3 to 5 minutes long, they may make a whole event out of it. Now, beyond the reveal trailer, when do we get the full presentation? I'm going to assume it happens in January, the same way it happened for Switch 1. Some might argue that because of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD releasing January 16th, that it's unlikely that Nintendo would reveal fully the Switch 2 in this month. But the fact of the matter is, most months of the year there's going to be some published Nintendo game, if not more than one. Going back to early 2017, we got the Switch presentation January 13th of 2017. And just a week later, Nintendo published Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King on Nintendo 3DS, and then on February 3rd, just a couple weeks later, Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World. So this notion that we can't have a major presentation within a couple weeks, I don't really think is out of the question because they literally did it last time. Now, would you perhaps want to make the argument that because Returns HD is happening January 16th, that maybe we're not going to get the Switch 2 presentation in that same week, and perhaps we're waiting a little bit later into the month of January, perhaps early February? I think that's certainly a worthy consideration. I actually think it's interesting to think about February as a possibility because normally Nintendo does not make announcements with actual dates for their games this far in advance, and we already know about the date for Donkey Kong in January. And it has me wondering if we're even going to have a normal general direct for September. Perhaps we get to something smaller like a direct mini or a partner showcase, and they may not even have a major published game for February, perhaps opening things up and also offering a slight break before the release of the Switch 2 soon after, maybe March. But also I think it's worth entertaining the possibility here that if we are talking about the reveal happening slightly later, perhaps we could be looking at a launch of a console happening slightly later as well. Now, Switch 2 released March 3rd of 2017. There is still the whole month of March to enjoy the sales for the end of the fiscal year. So if they were to move things up a couple weeks here, have the presentation in February, they could still have a similar gap of time like they did with Switch 1, and still have a few weeks left in the fiscal year. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to wait till April or May for the launch of the console, but if that did happen, it wouldn't be the end of the world either. But something that I think makes a lot of sense is for the full-on presentation to happen before February 9th of 2025. Why, you might ask? Well, that's because February 9th of 2025 is a Super Bowl, where some of the most viewed and expensive commercials happen in the year. Back for Super Bowl 2017, there was a Nintendo Switch commercial, and I would not be shocked in the slightest if Nintendo wants to have a commercial for Switch 2 in the Super Bowl as well. When it comes to launching a new console, the marketing really ramps up, and Nintendo's going to invest a lot more in this department. So if we're still talking about Switch 2 launching by the end of March 2025, then maybe we can wait a little bit later, but not by much, a couple weeks at most, possibly the first week of February, but I'm still leaning towards January being the time that this would happen. Now, after this presentation, once Nintendo shows everything about the console, the launch window, some dates for some games, the features, the controllers, the details on the specs that they're willing to relay to the public, pre-orders will be out there, people will be getting ready to buy the console, getting ready to buy peripherals and all the games that will be available, and there will be a lot of marketing, including perhaps a Super Bowl. And so maybe we could call this phase 3.5, because not only will there be marketing, will people be getting the word out there, but there might even be demo events where people will get hands-on with the console and will learn even more details about what it has to offer. And then this would all lead to the launch, which we're still hoping and expecting to be March of 2025, which would be the final phase where the console is actually out there, and then it's truly the beginning of Nintendo's next generation. This is pretty much how I envision things are going to happen. I'm sure there's potential flux, and this is all operating on the assumption that Switch 2 does launch March of 2025, or at least close to it, which at this point is not guaranteed. All that's guaranteed is that Nintendo will reveal the console before the end of the fiscal year, but I remain optimistic. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.